If ethics were no concern, what do you think would be the most interesting scientific experiment? Clone the same child 100 times and see how differently they turn out based on social, economic and cultural differences in their lives. Bonus if it's a clone of me. Edit. Thanks. I always wondered if given another set of circumstances how my life would have turned out. It isn't bad now, and my upbringing wasn't terrible by any stretch. But I just always wondered what could have been. Edit 2. I don't have kids. But I think, for me, I'd rather watch 100 clones of my child than have and raise one kid myself. The US ran an experiment like this right with identical triplets put up for adoption, didn't they? Was a documentary on it a couple of years ago. Yeah, 3 identical strangers. Answering the actual main question. I'd love to see some nature vs nurture experiments on twin/triplets the same way as in the documentary. Probably there are more, but they are not publicly accessible. As a radiation therapist, I'd like some definitive proof of radiation hormesis. Determining if the linear no threshold model of radiation safety out of the 50s is still the correct way of thinking about radiation exposure, or if there is in fact a therapeutic dose with a beneficial effect on aging and cancer prevention before negative effects are apparent. Edit. Hey. Thanks for the great thoughts/discussions below, everyone. I'm new to Reddit and people gave me shiny things and I like them. Thank you. I chose to do my final paper on radiation hormesis at uni 15 years ago and it still fascinates me. I reviewed a lot of the evidence for the hormetic effect, the below average incidence of cancer in a town in Japan with a naturally radon-enriched water supply, cancer incidence after Hiroshima and Chernobyl and animal studies. Also, my dentist, at the time, was remaining present for all of his patients' x-rays because he was a staunch believer in hormesis. Anyway, I'm sure we can all agree that it's just plain unethical/immoral to expose humans to radiation just to test a theory. So, we'll just have to glean our data from unfortunate accidents and continue to live on the safe side, unless anyone else has some bright ideas. I like this one the most. A lot of this thread is just weird daydreams about forcing people to kill each other without a real purpose. But this feels like it could actually be super informative and could benefit people a lot in terms of cancer prevention and treatment. Jesus Christ, the people on this thread are terrifying. Adding a few extra neuroprosthetic limbs to a human. Most research revolves around replacing lost limbs. Why not add a few and see what happens to the map in our brain? Along the same lines, building a direct brain-to-brain interface could be fun. Merging 2 brains. My mind immediately thinks of Machamp. I don't think it would work like that though. My thoughts immediately went to Drive. Octopus. Plato's Republic method of switching all the babies at birth and redistributing them among families at random. Creating a society that has no option but to look past bloodlines and see itself as one cohesive whole. I think that would lead to a lot of accidental incest. I also think that's incredibly likely because it's been shown that children who are separated from their families at extremely young ages, meeting them again, mostly unknowingly, can spark an intense attraction. It's called genetic attraction and it's similar to Oedipus and his attraction to his mother, and is what should be called the Oedipus complex. Twin Town. A village of populated by 100 pairs, if twins and left to breed for 5 generations. Only twin offspring are allowed to stay in the village. You could probably do that in The Sims. Thanks for my new time waster. How much sawdust can you put in Rice Krispies before people start to notice? No, that's too unethical. In light of COVID, I would like to see a parallel universe where absolutely zero precautions were implemented by any government and the virus was allowed to run wild. How bad could it get? Or would it quickly hit critical end and natural selection would proceed, and the survivors would end up with COVID being just a other flu? Question mark? I suppose some areas of the globe are probably fairly close to this reality. Brain or body transplant. They tried it on monkeys. Complete failure. I mean, it is basically like Lego for doctors, right? Of course you fail a few times. Raise a kid in that soundless room. It's said that 30 minutes in there could cause hallucinations, and I'm curious if a human could adapt to that. Edit. I forgot about deaf people. Auditory hallucinations or visual. IDK, I forgot the name. I'll try to find it. The room is basically soundproofed out until the point you can hear your heartbeat. Raising a human with no sense of education, social skills, potty training, love, or compassion. It would be interesting to see how wild of a species we could be. There was a child named Jeannie who was found at 13 years old. For her whole life before then, she was locked in her mother's basement chained to a wall. If I remember correctly, she couldn't talk or communicate at all, or physically move by herself. Since she was found and rescued, many people studied her to understand the effects of what she went through. For example, they wondered how her ability to learn language was affected, and they tried to teach Jeannie how to speak English, but she couldn't, because she did not have the mental capacity due to the neglect and isolation, and her vocal cords were not trained to make the sounds needed for speech. It's a very sad story. I think it was actually her father who kept her like that. Her mom herself had some mental problems. Maybe not the most interesting, but I think a lot about what would happen if someone lived with a continuous tone or white noise playing from the moment they're born without ever being told about it, and what would happen if one day it stopped. This was basically me until I was about 14. I've had tinnitus for as long as I can remember. Thought that was just what quiet sounded like. Then I found out what tinnitus was. Hasn't stopped yet. An experiment designed to prepare us for what it will be like to live in bunkers for the rest of our life. Or space. Whichever comes first. Take 20 to 50 people of different races, social classes, religions, ages, etc. Ideally half and half women and men. Lock them in some sort of commune by themselves and just watch. See what happens. Do not tell them why they're there or when they're leaving. Convince them the world is ending. Give them enough food to keep them alive for a year, but the materials to provide their own medicine, but hopefully have a doctor or scientist on board. Give them everything they need to be self-sustaining. Ideally they would not die, but I feel like there would be causalities. I think it would be interesting to see if anyone went crazy after a few years of only seeing the same people and having to uproot their lives to live in this bunker. I think it would tell us a lot. I should imagine that there are quite a few unethical experiments occurring that the general public don't get to hear about due to the illegality and immorality of it. Ever since Dolly the clone cheap, they'll always push it further regardless of public opinion. They'll just keep it on the hush hush. True. For decades all the way up to the 70s. The government carried out the Tuskegee experiments, where they gave black men with syphilis fake treatments just to record the effects. That was only a few decades ago. Who knows what's going on right now that won't be made public until 2060. They didn't even tell some of them what disease they had, or that there was other actually effective treatments. 2 groups of infants on 2 desert islands. Provide for their needs and raise them, but make no attempt at enculturation. Observe intra-island sociology and eventually introduce the populations to each other to observe inter-island sociology. The big question, would they be territorial and warring, or peaceful and interbreed? You know what? Duck it. I'm doing this. Hosin, I volunteer to have my kids. I'm 15 now, but when I do have I kids of my own, I will contact you. This comment concerns me. Reanimating the dead. I don't think that's so much an ethics issue, and more of a not possible issue. Imagine there is an island with a population of 60 adults, all couples, all fertile, and 30 young children. Each couple has one. Now imagine every single one of them gets an incurable, terminal disease. The islanders are given 30 cures. How will they distribute them? See, the interesting thing is that most of them have a strong instinct to save their children over themselves. But if all 30 cures are given to all 30 children, everyone dies. Those children aren't capable of taking care of themselves. With the adults dead, they'll be dead within weeks. So here are some interesting questions. How would the islanders distribute the cures if they all got together and discussed it, versus how would the cures be distributed if every couple would be given one and don't know what the other families are doing with this? But wait, if we have hundreds of these islands, we can explore the most interesting question of all. What is the ideal ratio of adults to children to save? As we established, if only the kids are cured, they are doomed. But if only half of the adults are cured, every one of them will have suffered the loss of their child, and this might have a long-term negative impact on their mental health. So if we had hundreds of these islands, we could study them for decades after the cure is given to find out which island is the happiest and most prosperous, and then we will know the ideal ratio. Maybe it's 18 children and 12 adults. Let's find out. That's some pretty dark stuff. I imagine the most likely scenario wouldn't involve any discussion though. Unless they were forced to sort it out peacefully, I would think there would be a fight between some of the men with one, or a small group coming out on top. There might be 3 or 4 men that survive. They will then keep their wives, probably, and their own kids, and give the leftover cures to people they like best. I can't imagine they would want to save other people's kids, since everyone is fertile and they can just make more. Right. In reality it's less of a math problem, and more of a muscles and sharp sticks problem. Just exactly how many 5-year-olds could a grown man take on in a fight, given that neither side has any weapons, and both sides are given several hours worth of training from a combat specialist, which has been tailored to the particular combat situation. Both sides would also have to be trained, drugged, to not run away/give up and fight fearlessly. The number is easily above 10. But with past conversations on the topic, I don't think anyone could take on 100 or more. Fatigue would set in, and once you're down, man, you're done for. Depends on the location too. In an enclosed space the number would be lower than out in the open. Do you mean in which one could in total, or at once? Because I have a feeling being in an enclosed space without weapons gives the single target an advantage. Allies try not to inflict damage on each other. Sole target has free range. Get those 5 yos into a bottleneck, and you're fighting against endurance over the children. Out in the open though you're screwed without that bottleneck advantage. Seeing if we could scientifically mold a child to become a serial killer at a later age. As a criminology major this actually would be interesting to see, although you'd have to take genetics into account to deal with the nature v nurture debate. Nice try. Black Mirror writers. My pitch for Black Mirror: a psychopath kidnaps people and uses super advanced AI technology to study how much fear the average person can take before they just die. Killing someone and bringing them back to life to ask them about the afterlife. I know this can be normally asked to revive patients, so to make it more interesting, it is tested on people with different religious backgrounds to know whether or not what they perceive is dependent on their beliefs. I don't know how realistic this is though. The white light is often attributed to the extreme adrenaline and consciousness state changing during the trauma of resuscitation. Generally if a person is down more than 2 minutes then they're going to have significant hypoxic brain injury. So I just don't think you could bring someone back after long enough for them to have left their body, however long that is, in order to ask them about heaven. I've always wanted to do an experiment where a baby, for their whole life, is not exposed to the color green. Make sure their environment has no green whatsoever, or have them wearing specific contact lenses or whatever. Then, when they are of a certain age, show them green for the first time. This has essentially already happened, though with different colors. They created those colorblind glasses that allowed those unable to see a particular color the ability to see it through the glasses. Those don't work the way you think they do. It doesn't let them see the colors they're colorblind to. It corrects the shade to be a color that they can already see and helps them differentiate colors, not see new ones. I would want to turn on all of the genes in various birds and see if any of the dinosaur traits can be revived. Without ethics we could dramatically push forward medicine. Animal models are the best we have, but they're really no substitute for a human. And human trials are completely restricted by ethics, and rightly so. Replacing lab mice with boatloads of Russian prisoners would lead to many advances in medicine. Eugenics as a tool to eliminate genetic disorders etc. down to a tight and wholly unethical standard would mean a lot of genetic disorders could just disappear forever in a generation, or giving anti-vaxxers the diseases they refuse to vaccinate for. Okay. But what would you do if you were allowed to be unethical too? Throw the veil of anonymity on a social platform and give people the freedom to run their own communities and observe the resulting social patterns. So, Reddit? Indeed. Take people of differing socio-economic standing, cultures, and religions, one at a time. Give one a gun, and tell them they can kill the other. If they choose to kill the other, they receive what the other person is worth. Kill Jeff Bezos, and you become the richest person in the world. If they choose not to kill the other person, that person will be given a chance to kill them, but will not know they are making the second choice. There are no legal consequences if they choose to kill. They do not have to look the other person in the eyes, but are given a portfolio with a picture and important facts such as net worth, family. If both people have the chance to kill, they get to go free. I actually thought about this as a prank game, so friends set you up type deal, and the gun would be empty or have blanks. I'm mostly curious who would be more likely to murder? Question mark. The poor person with a chance to become rich? Question mark. Or the rich person certain that the poor person will take that chance? Question mark. In that scenario I'm gonna kill every time, just because there is a 50/50 chance I'm going first, and they get the opportunity to kill me if I let them live. I'm not taking that chance. I'm poor as shit, so I can just go free. Rat utopia, but with generations of people. Honestly, it's not so different to the real world. I think we are just getting started with phase 3 in developed countries. Stagnation. That experiment was complete bunk. The guy went out with his conclusion already in mind and twisted his interpretations to suit it. And the only really interesting one in the series, Universe 25, is named such because it took 25 tries to get something exciting enough to publish. The only reason it's still relevant is because misanthropic idiots keep using it to justify their lack of empathy, while pretending they are the bearers of some secret dark truth. Try lots of different ways of organizing society to see how different forms work. I want to see futarchy, communism and anarcho-capitalism in action. Some might say that communism already have been tried, but a lot of people deny that. If ethics wasn't a problem, I would like to see their version of communism. I actually don't see much of an ethical dilemma with this one. Just I don't think any government is going to allow its subjects or land to be used for that. Plus, how these systems work on a small scale is much different than how they would work on a large scale. The reason they work on the small scale is everyone can see who's working and who's not at a communal farm. You want to be a lazy button in a communal farm, you'll be shunned by everyone else. You want to take more than your share, or try to boss everyone around, you won't last long. But in a big metropolitan city, who knows whether you're a net giver, taker, or neutral? And the bosses of course get more and more removed from contact with us plebs, so who can tell what they are doing? And pace actin. As bosses get power, they get corrupted. Socialism fails because human nature is self-centered. We are at an interesting juncture, as the wireless internet connects us all the time. Will we become more cohesive and committed to each other, or like rats crowded into a cage? Will the non-stop intrusion of others' desires drive us collectively crazy? Russian scientists were able to keep a decapitated dog head alive using a bicycle pump. Imagine what we could do if we did it with a human head and more modern technology. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more videos.